I've just built what might prove to be the most useful addition to this workshop. But that's not the only reason I'm making this video, because what I've built is not exactly unique. The video is actually aimed at showing you how I build on the fly, and the process I go through in making a prototype that actually ends up being the final product. You don't have to make something perfect. You can make mistakes, and most of the fun is actually in the build. So let's get on with the what and the why of the build. And let's start with the why first. This entire thing is a problem. You see, there's just too much stuff in the way. And what's really annoying, or that, if you're going to fill your workshop with a big workbench that's right in the middle, you need to be able to walk around all sides of it to get to the tools at the sides and also to work on the piece that you've got in the middle. I need space. And that's hopefully what I'm going to create right now in this video. So now for the what. And as I've said, you've seen these before, just not exactly the same as this one. This is a dust hose boom arm. And the first person I actually saw making this was John Cesaro over at Lincoln Street Woodworks. And like most that I've seen, his extends from the side wall of his workshop, because that's where his dust vac is situated. But that won't work for me, and I'm yet to see this exact design that I'm going to show you today anywhere else. And that's why I want to show you how I think, and then how I process those thoughts into actually making something. So let's go. So while I do this 80s style A-Team compilation of all the scrap wood and different parts I've got at my disposal, let's do a quick talk about the prototype vision. Initially I wanted to make use of some of the heavy duty hinges that I've got left over, but considering the overall weight and the fact that I don't want this boom arm to actually swing freely when I use it, I figured a thick dowel and a homemade hinge would provide the element of friction that would be the best solution. But that does complicate the build slightly. But at the end of the day, if it doesn't work, well, I've lost nothing but some offcuts. Job one was to house the offcut of dowel in 2 pieces of 3/4 inch ply. I'm planning on having the dowel stationary while the hinge itself does the moving. You'll see what I mean. But job one, aim one, was to have this dowel itself at a solid 90 degrees to allow the swing to be flat rather than at an angle. Aim one was failed. Not once, but twice. And as this was a prototype, well, for once there was no swearing. You've got to embrace every single mistake you make, especially when prototyping, because that's what's going to help you just to keep carrying on and keep experimenting. The third fit was as good as I was going to get it without a pillar drill, and so I glued it and screwed it at the one end, and I've left the other end open for now so I can install the arm on it. For the arm itself, I've drilled the hinge pieces out now, but they are the exact dimension of the dowel. And now, let me explain the format of this video a little bit more. This voiceover right now is post-build, so I know what's going to happen, but to give you an insight of my thoughts along the way, here's live mark, if you will. That way you get to hear the process as it's happening. We are still working very strongly with trial and error right now, because this is going to be technically the base piece of the hinge. These are going to be the hinge pieces. So we need those to move, but not to create slop. What I've also got here is 2 pieces that are going to become the arm. That's pretty much it. So we need to widen these holes. How we attach them to this, I think I've got an idea for that too. Let's give it a shot. I'm not sure that that guy's got as much of a plan as he's actually letting on. Luckily though, I'm here to explain the process. Now, as the holes are the exact diameter of the dowel, it's a bit too tight a fit. And I knew this going in, and actually wanted it. And I'm just going to use this thinner dowel, wrapped in 80 grit sandpaper, just to refine the fit so that it's snug, but not stuck. And it's not that hard a job, but don't throw the dowel away just yet, because guaranteed when you screw everything together, it may need a little bit more tweaking. I'm leaving the end cuts, the final cuts on each piece right till the end, just in case something comes up that I haven't foreseen. I like to do this with every build. So now is the time that I'm actually going to cut the dowel down to length. And I'm going to reference my measurements from this directly from the arm pieces that I've cut. I do this for builds and I do it for prototypes. I do it in everything that I can. Measurements can go wrong and change over the duration of the build. If you set them at the start, there's a good chance they won't be accurate when you actually get to that part of the build. And now hold tight for the worst angle I possibly could have filmed this from. The basic design I've gone for here have the hinge parts actually perpendicular to the arm itself. Kind of in a capital I if you look at it directly head on. And for added strength, I've actually decided to route a 3/4 inch groove in the hinge pieces for the arm to sit in. I'm not bothered whether the grooves are actually central themselves, so I'm just running the router along this clamped straight edge, and then I'm flipping the top and bottom pieces so that they actually match. This just ensures that the groove itself, albeit not central, is the same distance from the side of each of the 2 hinge pieces, so the arm itself won't be on the tilt. There's only two aims here really, that the arm has strength and that it doesn't have any sag. Because if it does sag as you swing the arm, it's either going to continually get closer to the ceiling or further away, depending on which way the angle's going, and I don't want that. But let's be honest here, I'm really only aiming for 85% perfection, because that's what's attainable. And, well, we saw that the dowel was maybe 3 degrees off anyway, so fingers crossed if I go wrong, they'll balance each other out. You never know. Back to a little bit of fine tuning as the pieces are not quite aligned, but incredibly close. And don't forget, a little friction is just fine. It's what you're aiming for here. Let's check in live, and I bet he mentions that friction fit a lot. It has got a very tight friction fit. It'll all loosen up because I'm going to give this a really good tidy up. But first, I had an idea for extending this. Now, I'm not too worried about how thin this is because, to be honest, it's not going to span very far, but all I really want is for it to clear the workbench so it's not snagging as I pull the lead round. So for that, I'm going to need 2. And to join them together, well, I was going to try and be a little bit clever. Cards on the table here. This is me trying to be way too clever and failing. I'll show you what I was doing, but in truth, unless you have a good reason not to, I would suggest just using one longer piece for the arm. I've opted for these draw runners as they're cheap and I had them, and I had the bright idea that if I could make it shorter while not in use, then I'd save some ceiling space. But who needs to save ceiling space? And actually the accessories that I make for this boom arm render this stage utterly useless. But this bit is an important addition. These homemade spacers are designed to reduce the rub of the arm on the hinge itself, and that way the weight of the arm won't cause it to snag. I've popped one above and below the arm, which as you can see at this stage has actually been sanded and trimmed to reduce the weight and to, well, make it look nicer. Yeah, you guessed it, the prototype is now the final product. It's funny how that happens, but it's also a great feeling, because this is the moment you actually know you're going to succeed in building something. They don't all end this way. And don't get me wrong, I am already thinking of ways to improve this. So let's go back live to the fitting and the testing. Now you'll notice there's an extra piece of 18mm ply on the top. That's because I held it onto the ceiling and it didn't clear my sound panels. So I'm hoping that this does the job. It's getting heavy. So I've put 4 countersink large screw holes in it that are going to go straight into the beams. And again, I'm hoping that's going to be enough, because once this is opened, it's not that this bit's going to be too heavy, but it's just if you pull down on it, say the cord gets snagged for a second, anything like that, it just adds that extra little bit of leverage. And I'm finding this quite heavy, just holding it. So we'll see. Wish me luck. When someone says wish me luck, it really instills confidence, doesn't it? I'm only checking for wires here as the screws I'm going to use are so long, but it's still good practice. The screws are more than enough for the weight though, but here's another fail. Not a huge one, but it is an annoying one. The sound panels that I've made to use to stop echo when I'm talking to you guys, well, I've left not quite enough margin to clear them. But in my defense, it is really close. Probably close enough that in time the whole arm will loosen a bit and will actually clear them. But I wanted to be sure, so I had a bright idea to loosen the bottom screw just a touch to see if that would actually help, which is a really odd thing to do because the dowel's glued in. Still, I can't really explain it. Maybe I loosened the arm somehow with the vibrations, but it did make a difference. Enough anyway. I'm going to call that a win. But I'm not done there. If you've watched any of my videos before, you know that I won't stop here. And I want to over-engineer, and I want to make things that make this way more complicated, but hopefully more useful. So here we go. I quickly made a bracket for the 3 most used adapters that I have, because I use this Centec system for now, so I can use different adapters for different tool sizes that I've got. And if you have numerous small parts for anything, you're going to spend a lot of time looking around your workshop for them. I also made a couple of these hose brackets to attach to the ceiling, and these actually worked really well. To get a really nice friction fit on these without making them too tight, the hole itself to make the bracket has to be just a hair over a semicircle. And now let me show you where I have these and why. And for that, we're going to have to go up to the ceiling. So I think the best way I can really show you this is each stage at a time. So the arm went up, and this dust hose here, the long hose that I had coiled on the floor, this goes straight into the cyclone, which in turn goes into the dust collector. And the big aim with this is that this connects to all of my handheld power tools. But more than that, and why I've given it a little bit of extra length, is because it also connects to my Hoover attachment for cleaning the entirety of the workshop and, importantly, the workbench. During most builds, this is the state you'll see it in. Because I can leave it dangling down, I can use my workbench and I can clean up between jobs. I'll be honest with you, it's not a perfect solution because as you can see, I've had to attach 2 hoses together to get the length that I need, but I didn't want to go out and buy a long hose before I knew exactly whether it would work. It's connected to the main arm itself just using a series of cable ties. And then for the keen eyes amongst you, this could potentially cause a problem if I'm cutting larger panels on the table saw. I've thought of a solution for that and it's simple. You see, I put one of my hose brackets behind this light here, so when it's not in use, I can clip it away and it won't get in the way of larger panels going through the table saw. If you make this and you don't want to make the accessories, something I discovered yesterday is with one more hose clip, I can have everything off to this side set away and it still clears the whole workbench on a swing. Is that a design that's better than what I've gone for? Probably. Am I going to change it? Probably not. Let me just talk you through this contraption right here. To be honest with you, this is not 100% necessary, but it's very nice to have. You saw that I cut the holes into this piece of wood here to hold all of the accessories that I need to go on the end of the hose to connect to different tools. Well, I decided to take it one step further. So I cut a piece of oval ply and I attached it exactly the distance from the ceiling of the width of the hose. So when not in use, I can take the hose, I left enough depth to wrap it around twice, and then I've got my hose connector so I can keep everything nicely out the way. This bit underneath, well, this is just for me because this, well, let me show you. This is something to consider if you're filming your work. This is to put cameras on so that I can get a really good view on the workbench for shots like this. I don't know how I got here. And then the final part of this is it's a great place to hang things that you need. A hook under this one, I've got some knobs to hang off on this one, and it's for things like the remote control for my dust collection and anything else that I don't want to lose and I'm going to use regularly, like my cheap hearing protection. And then there's this. Sometimes it doesn't matter how you get the job done. This, well, this is the Hoover attachment for all of this. So when I want to clean all around my workbench, the walls, the ceiling, everywhere, I attach this monstrosity of dowel, gaffer tape and hose, and I've got myself a vacuum attachment because it gets the job done. I laugh about this and you may think this is overkill, but if you genuinely look around your workshop and see how much fine dust is settled on all the surfaces, the more you can get rid of at source or in a cleanup, the better. For me, dust extraction is an absolute non-negotiable. It has to be as good as I can afford it at the time that I can afford it. And in truth, these builds are quite fun, but I've noticed in the couple of months since I actually built it, my workshop has never been cleaner and the air itself has never had less dust in it. I mean, with this beauty, I may even be able to get rid of the broom from my workshop. Or maybe that's a bit dramatic. But on a serious note, whether your dust extraction is amazing or pretty primitive like mine has been for many years, this is your fail-safe. They're not particularly comfortable, they're cumbersome, they're hot on your face, but a decent one of these is what makes all the difference. And here's some exciting news. I mentioned that your dust extraction should be whatever you can afford it to be, and it should be as good as you can afford it to be. Well, thanks to you lot for watching my videos, and for those of you who have watched long enough, you know how much I absolutely appreciate you. I've been able to spend a couple of hours at Axminster Tools, and I've picked out 3 huge upgrades to my dust collection system. But even with them, that boom arm's gonna stay. I said at the start, I'll say it again, it is one of the best things I've ever built for this workshop. If you're gonna give it a go, put your own personal twist on it and enjoy the build. If you've enjoyed this video, you'll love one of these. Thank you so much for watching. I'll see you over there.